When I was about 12 years old, my mom was having the first of her cornea transplant surgeries, and my grandma came to town to stay with us and kind of took over the roles that mom had as mom. You know, she cooked our meals and she did our laundry, really kind of took over those places for mom. Well, mom had always cut my hair. For 12 years, I never had anyone ever beside my mom cut my hair. And so it was with great fear that this 12-year-old Ken Bushey with a double cowlicks sat in that chair and let my grandma cut my hair. She took her time, and when she was all done, she stepped back and she said, and I quote, "You just got a $30 haircut," which was quite a boast in 1985, you know? But the mirror confirms the truth. And Grandma, if you're listening, if you're watching today, I love you. I don't know that we have really ever talked about that day since then. I'm thankful for all that you've done for me in my life, how you've set an example for me. I love you. But that was not a $30 haircut. We probably have all had those experiences where we have been embarrassed in public because of the way we look. Maybe it's a bad haircut. Maybe it's a small pimple that feels like it's taken over half our face, right? Maybe it's we discover after we're already in public that we have two shoes on from two different pairs. Anybody want to admit it? You've been there? Why is it that we are so interested in the way we look? I think it's maybe because we believe the adage related to success is true. Image is everything. Maybe we believe that. We understand our image to be directly connected to our success, but we need to define success. You know, some would aim to be wealthy, to be at the top of their career, to have a nice house, to have a nice car, to have the perfect family. Interestingly, there was a Gallup poll that was done pretty recently, 2019, I think, and they asked this question, how do you define success? And they asked the question, how do others define success? And it's interesting that everybody really thought that others define success in that way, in regards to wealth and career and status kinds of things. But everybody said, well, for me, how I define success is healthy relationships. That's what really makes me successful, feel successful. And you know, I don't know about you, but I would say that I could kind of summarize it in similar ways. But then I also recognize that if I dig a little bit deeper with this, what I know about me is that I want to have healthy relationships with people more than anything. And so I have this temptation to try to be successful in all these other areas. Wealth, career, status. Because those who I want to like me most, I want to like me most. That makes sense? I think it all really comes back to, even if we want to believe that it's all about, I just want healthy relationships, we feel like we can have healthy relationships if we have the image to have healthy relationships. Today we begin this brand new series on the book of Esther, and over the next 4 weeks we're going to look at this story, how it relates to success. And I'm going to give you some homework. I'm not going to ask you if that's okay or not, okay? I was going to, but I'm not going to now. But it's a challenge, okay? Here's your homework. It's not hard. Here's your challenge. Between Sundays, I want you to read the book of Esther. Every week, between Sundays, read the whole book of Esther. Now, it's only 10 chapters long. The 10th chapter is only 3 verses. You can do this, okay? So read the book of Esther, because I really think that it's going to give you a deeper context of where we are and what we're talking about week to week. Esther, let's just kind of give you some background, and maybe it's a little bit of ancient world history. And probably as soon as I say that, you're like, uh-oh, no, I'm done. Hold on, okay? A little bit of background. Esther lived when the dominant world power was the Median-Persian Empire. The empire during this time, where we're going to read in this story, was all the way from India to northern Egypt, to Kush. 127 provinces within the Median-Persian Empire. Now, it might be helpful also to understand that the Median-Persian Empire was the one that took over the Babylonian Empire. Now, last week, Pastor Mark talked a little bit about the Babylonian Empire, and you remember perhaps that story, the story of Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how they were of Jerusalem, but when Babylon came and sacked Jerusalem, they took these exiles away and kind of scattered them throughout the Babylonian Empire, and they tried to reculture them. They tried to change their name. They gave them a new god or gods to worship, and they just really tried to wash away everything that was Jew about them. Well, now the Median-Persian Empire has conquered the Babylonian Empire. And so all of those that were exiled by Babylon throughout the Babylonian Empire are now exiled all throughout the Median-Persian Empire. They're living all over the place. And as we open the book of Esther, King Xerxes, feeling really confident in his fortress city of Susa, modern-day Iran, wants to throw a party for himself. So he invited all of his military nobles from all over the empire to come to the fortress city of Susa for a 7-day banquet. But that was just the beginning of a party that was going to last 180 days. Can you imagine that party? For 6 months, he flaunted his wealth and all of his success. And then, to finish out this 6-month party, he planned another banquet. But this time it was for everyone. It wasn't for just the nobles, all the military leaders, but it says that it was for the least and the greatest, everyone who worked inside the citadel, everyone who worked inside this fortress city in Susa. From the least to the greatest was invited to this banquet. It was a place in his palace, a garden in his palace, very beautiful, decked out. No expenses were spared. There was no restrictions on wine or food, it says. The wine was served in goblets of gold. Even the couches were made of gold. And when I read that, I think that sounds uncomfortable. A gold couch. But that's fashion, isn't it? I mean, maybe it's more than that, but when I think about fashion, this is how I define fashion. Fashion is being uncomfortable for the sake of looking good. I mean, that's pretty close, isn't it? Sometimes we believe that giving up our own comfort is a small price to pay for the payoff of others admiring how successful we have been. Boy, aren't they something. Right? And it seems to be what this party was all about. And while this is going on, this whole party is going on in the palace gardens, Xerxes' wife, Queen Vashti, is throwing another party for all the women who lived and served in the palace. Because apparently the women weren't included in the least to the greatest in the kingdom. They were less than the least to the greatest, and so they weren't invited to the king's party. Is that interesting? Kind of interesting? And that whole idea is confirmed when we read this, that on the seventh day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him to bring before him Queen Vashti wearing her royal crown. Oh, isn't that nice? Invite her in to participate in this banquet that is for all the men. She gets to come in. How nice. But that's not what it's about at all. He does this in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. I cringe when I read that, for real. So you have ornate and very uncomfortable couches made of gold and silver so that you can flaunt your wealth in your image. I think that's weird. I think that's impractical. I think it's a little over the top. But displaying a person as an object for the sake of your image crosses a line. Anyone else on that page with me? But when the attendants, it says, delivered the king's command to Queen Vashti refused to come. And I say, way to go, Queen Vashti. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Why is he so angry? I think it's more than he just didn't get what he wanted. I think it had more to do with this was a 6-month party. We're coming down to the end of it. This is the last banquet. And this is all about me. And now you're going to mess it all up for me. For me. For me. For me. He's not about to let his image of success be forfeited now. I'm going to give you a few warnings today. Here's the first one. When you only care about your image, you'll show little care for others. Maybe that doesn't bother you, but it should bother you. If you only care about your image, you'll show little care for others. Humanity has been guilty since the beginning of treating others as tools for our success, objects for our desires. And when you view life as all about you, there isn't room for others to have any success, unless it translates into success for you. When you only care about your image, you'll have little care for others. So Vashti refuses to be put on display, and Xerxes isn't quite sure how to handle this, so he spoke with the wise men. That sounds like a good thing to do. Because the Bible says, listen to advice, accept discipline, and at the end you will be counted among the wise. If we truly want to understand the secrets of success, it makes sense to do a little bit of digging. You know, to get some advice, to seek wisdom. So he spoke with the wise men who understood the times. They not only had a position as wise men, but they also had some experience. They had qualifications. But here's where it all falls apart. He spoke with the wise men who understood the times and were closest to the king. When he needed to know what to do, he was careful to ask people who would tell him what he wanted to hear. We need to be careful of that. We don't just go down the road because everybody else who's calling this the road to success is going down that road. Who do you most want to impress? Really ask yourself that question. Because that person or those persons are the ones who will determine the image that you try to project. The truth is, everyone has his or her view of what it means to be successful. Advice in itself is not helpful. Because we look at how that proverb that we just looked at finishes. And it finishes this way: many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. In other words, we can come up with all kinds of plans to be successful, but it is the Lord's advice that really gives us a firm footing for lasting success. Is this true? So let me ask again, who do you most want to please? The king's advisors convinced Xerxes to kick Vashti off the throne, which really wasn't much of a throne anyway because she had no authority, did she? Convinced him to find a new queen. The rationale went like this: she's not only messing with you, but she's messing with all of us who are trying our best to enslave women too. Really, that's how the story goes. You can read it for yourself. I encourage you to do that. Yeah, you're challenged. You've got homework, right? That's how it goes. She's not only messing with you, she's messing with all of us who are trying to enslave women. And if you let this go, they say your kingdom is going to fall apart because there's not going to be an end to this Me Too movement. That's my paraphrase. But that's what's going on. They said, we cannot let this get out. It'll ruin us. It actually says it this way: there will be no end of disrespect and discord. When you only care about your image, you'll expect respect from others, but have no respect for others. That's the way it works. So what does success look like for you? Do you use people to get ahead? Many people are considered highly successful today, but they are doing so by climbing on the backs of others to reach their own success. They are more interested in their own image than those created in the image of God. Beware of being successful, that successful villain, only interested in your own image of success. But also, there's a flip side of this. Also, beware of being a victim of someone else's success. Because, and here's the second warning, when others only see you as an object, they'll show little care for you. I think it's the next slide there. There it is. Xerxes listened to the advice of his wise men. He deposed Vashti, and then he sent word throughout all of his provinces, the whole empire, that the most beautiful virgin women were to be sent to his palace, enter his harem, and begin beauty treatments. Then from those, he would conduct a beauty pageant and select a new queen. Because, of course, the queen was nothing more than an object to be looked at and used by the king as he wished. Anyone else just really disgusted by this story? Of all the 127 provinces, there was a girl who was picked for the harem who was already living in the citadel of Susa, and she was a Jew. Her Hebrew name was Hadassah, but as was common in that day, she had another name. They'd given her a Persian name, Esther. Her mother and father had died. We don't know why. We don't know all the story there. But her cousin, first cousin Mordecai, older than her, was raising her. Mordecai was a Jew, also with a Babylonian name. Mordecai is Babylonian. It comes from the god Marduk. But he's serving in the citadel of Susa for the king. Listen, the king had no interest in who Esther was, or any of the other girls for that matter, right? It was no concern of his that she was orphaned. He didn't seem to care if she desired to be in his harem or was repulsed by the idea. He wasn't interested in getting to know her story, if there was any chemistry between the two of them, what others were saying about her. He wasn't interested in her past accomplishments, her present baggage, or her future hopes and dreams. He probably didn't know either one of her names. He was interested in one thing and one thing only: a beautiful body. When others only see you as an object, they'll have little care for you, for who you really are. And that may seem like common sense, but many people fall into this trap all the time. Because on the surface, it feels like, I'm wanted, I'm needed, someone likes me, I have something to offer them. He has clout, she has popularity, they noticed me, I must be special. And the truth is, you are special. But it's not because you give into their scheming that they can get what they want. Okay? That's not what makes you special. One might think that Esther, as a Jew, would see the injustice of this, the disgust of what was going on, the clear objectifying of women, and the sex trafficking that was taking place. But often those who are the tools for someone else's success believe that in some way that makes them successful too. I think that's where Esther was. She was trapped. She was thinking, maybe this feels good. The eunuch, the person who was put in charge of Esther, provided her with beauty treatments and special food, assigned to her 7 female attendants, and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. She's arrived, right? It feels so good. Let me just remind us, the best place in prison is still prison. And Satan would love for you to believe that it won't get any better than the prison that you're living in. But Satan is not interested in your success. He's only interested in ruining you. These women had to go through 12 months of beauty treatments. I mean, if you haven't got it, you haven't got it. I mean, that's my thought. 12 months of beauty treatments, what's that going to accomplish? But 6 months of essential oils, read the story, it's there. And then 6 months of perfume and cosmetics. And when it's all done, Esther won the favor of all who, what's the word? Saw her. She's just an object. As did the king. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. Wow, Esther had arrived. To what? And I'm guessing that Esther's banquet was all about Xerxes' image and displaying Esther's beauty to others, just like he was going to do with Vashti, but she refused. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? She was his gorgeous slave. Maybe you've read this story and you thought, oh, I always thought this was just a really neat story of success for Esther. I read this story and I think this is a tragic story. A sad, sad story of a girl who was trapped and encouraged to believe that her only worth comes in her outward appearances. And unfortunately, many today have a similar sad story. But the next verses really punctuate the sadness. It says, but Esther had kept her family background and nationality a secret. Translated, she was scared to reveal who she really was. She was on this path to success and couldn't bear to jeopardize that. If you are trying to protect an image, you are hiding something. Think about that. What image are you trying to protect? What do you want people to think of you? What do you hope they never know about you? I hope that they think that I've got it all. Isn't that what Facebook's all about? You know, look at me. Look at all my successes. I hope that they never know that I'm broken and I have warts and that I fail all the time. Esther held secrets. She didn't think that people could accept who she really was. Who was she? Okay, she was a Jew, which means that she was taught from the time that she was born, or she should have been, that from the first human, God made male and female, that women are loved by God as men are loved by God. She should have known that. She was a Jew, which means that she knew that all humans, male and female, are made in the image of God. She was a Jew, so she knew that humans aren't to make any graven image of God, no idols, because humans are the image of God. You ever made that connection? The Jews did not put idols in their temple. Heaven is God's throne and earth is his footstool. This is his temple. And the image that he puts in his temple, we're it. We are representatives of our God. What a cool thought. She was a Jew, which means that she was to be a light to the nations who did not know her God, to help others see who God is and reflect his goodness. She was a Jew, which means that the promised Messiah was going to come from her family. But here she is, trapped. And she denied and kept secret who she really was. In the interest of success, have you denied who God says you are? I've given you a couple warnings. We've said when you only care about your image, you'll show little care for others. We've said when others only see you as an object, they'll show little care for you. Here's the third warning. When you keep secret who you really are, you show little care for God. Esther keeps God a secret. The one who designed her in the womb of her mother, who structured the intricacies of her DNA that ultimately resulted in the fact that she was female. Her stature, the color of her hair, and her eyes and her skin, all her physical features that others considered beautiful, all that was a gift from God, and she was keeping him a secret. The one who was most responsible for the qualities that everyone appreciated about her was a secret. And she wasn't the only one who was keeping these secrets. It says Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality just as Mordecai had told her to do. She was taking her cues from those closest to her. From those that she wanted to impress most. You may be keeping your story secret to protect your success or to protect someone else's. But hear this morning. If the potential for success tempts you to deny God's place in your story, you need to rethink how you define success. Don't keep God a secret. Interestingly, the story of Esther is the only book in the entire Bible where God is never mentioned. Do you know that? Never referenced. In his book, he's never mentioned. Scholars have debated why that is, but I'm convinced it's purposeful. I think it was done for a couple different reasons, but I think a primary reason is for us to hear this truth communicated, that even though you may not acknowledge God, that doesn't make him absent. Okay? You're going to read the story the next few weeks. And as you read this story, I believe the reader is compelled to say that had to have been God, even though he's never mentioned. Even though you may not acknowledge the presence of God, that doesn't mean that he is absent. Esther's story, this is a terrible, tragic story. It doesn't start well, but I guarantee you, you'll love how it ends. I've given you some warnings. But here, I want you to understand this. Understand, when you only care about your image and have little care for others, and others only see you as an object and have little care for you, and you keep secret who you really are and have little care for God, understand this: God still cares for you. Yes. You are made in the image of God. He still cares for you. No one is more interested in your success than he is, but he's going to define success differently than culture understands success. Here's the first secret. We're talking about secrets of success, right? Here's the first secret of success. Pursue who God says you are, not what you or others want you to be. So who does God want you to be? Who does he say you are? Listen to your destiny described in Romans chapter 8. For those God foreknew, who has God foreknown? Not a trick question. Everyone, right? You. For those God foreknew, he also predestined. This is your destiny. This is the destiny he wants for you. He's predestined you to be conformed to the image of his Son. the image of God. That he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. That's your destiny. Who are you? Listen to this. He just kind of says, this is who you are. And those he predestined, he also called. This is who you're called. Those he called, he also those who he justified, he also glorified. This is really a thing of faith, right? He's saying, this hasn't happened yet, but you can take it to the bank. Resurrection life. Death is not the end. This is who you are. What then shall we say in response to these things? You heard this verse earlier. I didn't even know that Jennifer had put this in there and that Amanda was going to read this earlier today. What should we say in response to this? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Image, the right image, is everything. Everything. Whose image do you believe you are? Don't fight for your own image. Pursue God, not what others or what you want you to be.